Hi there, listener, and thanks for joining me for this special flashback episode of the Ski Podcast. There are now over 260 episodes of the Ski Podcast, so over this summer, I'm publishing some special interviews from our back catalogue to help you keep your snow addiction under control until winter comes around again. Today, I'm taking you back 3 years to August 2022, when I spoke to ski instructor to the stars, Warren Smith from the Warren Smith Ski Academy. In this interview, Warren talks about how he got into skiing and his journey to Verbier via Hemel Hempstead, dry ski slope, and Seefeld in Austria. There's plenty about the early days of the UK freestyle scene, working with many of the youngsters who have now become Olympians, as well as the celebrities that he's taught over the years, including Laurence Dallaglio, Prince Harry, Princess Eugenie, Lewis Smith, Bradley Wiggins, and more. Towards the end of our interview, Warren talks about the services he's providing at the 2022 National Snow Show. Now, although this was, of course, for the 2022 show, it is relevant for this year's London Snow Show, as are his pre-season courses. Now, as we're looking ahead to this winter, don't forget, if you want to help the Ski Podcast and save yourself some money this winter, just use the code SKIPODCAST when you book your ski hire at insportrent.com. And that applies to any ski hire booked in their massive network across France, Austria and Switzerland. You'll get a guaranteed additional discount, or simply take the link in the show notes for your discount to be automatically applied. Right, let's have a listen to my chat with celebrity ski instructor Warren Smith. I am delighted to welcome Warren Smith, the eponymous founder of the Warren Smith Ski Academy, for this bonus episode of the Ski Podcast. Hi Warren, how are you?
Hey Ian, how you doing? Good to see you. It's good to speak to you.
Yeah, and you are based in Verbier just now, is that right?
Yeah, based in Verbier for the rest of the summer, and then over to the UK in the autumn.
Excellent. How's it looking in Verbier right now?
Verbier's good. Yeah, very green. You know, there's been a lot of activity with the evolution of the e-biking. You know, it seems to be getting stronger and stronger. So it's good. It's been a really nice summer here. Very warm. You know, warmer than normal temperatures. But everyone seems to be having a good time. So yeah, very, very nice.
Excellent. Well, I've wanted to chat to you for a long time. We go back a long way in the industry. In fact, I was doing some maths earlier, and I reckon it's about 20 years this year. We first met around that time. We'd both just set up, fairly new businesses. And I wondered if we could just take it back a little bit, even earlier than that, before we met. I wondered how you got into the industry. What was your background with skiing?
Well, I was very much... I lived right next to the Hemel dry ski slope back in the day. I just skied at the dry ski slopes, kind of spent every day there until I could afford to go away, do a season. And it was brilliant. Those venues built so many careers and, they weren't snow, but they were fantastic for getting your legs on, finding your balance, and some of us locally, I remember we used to have a skateboard park there before the dry ski slope, and I think we just transferred the skills, from BMXing into skiing, and it was great, So that it built, definitely helped build my career. Without that dry slope, I don't know what I'd sort of be doing right now. That's for sure.
And so you're from Hemel Hempstead, just to clarify, because some people might not even realise this, but where the snow centre is right now, the indoor snow slope. There was a dry slope before that, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's it. It was a dry slope. It was a very popular dry slope, actually. And when they were booming back in the 80s, the Hemel was definitely one of the leading venues, So I was a very dear friend, Pete, Gillespie still runs that venue, actually. And they do an incredible job at Hemel, so it got a lot of history to it.
Yeah, well, I actually raced there when I was at university. We did dry slope racing there, and there's a big dry slope racing scene, which isn't as much fun as doing it on snow. But yeah, it was, we used to go down there for the national finals and everything. So you learnt to ski down there. When was the first time you went out onto snow then?
It must have been 1989, 88. I went away with the school. And, you saved up your pennies, you got on those early doors school trips, and then spent, quite a lot of time at the dry slope, and then eventually went to Austria and worked over in Austria, and, quite lucky, got a job in a ski school that helped fund it. But yeah, it was those days are great. I can hardly remember them, actually.
Well, I did a bit of research before our chat, and I listened to your conversation with Phil Gordon on his excellent Legends of the Brand podcast. Yeah. I took two things from that school trip that you mentioned. One was, I found it really interesting. I mean, you've always been an entrepreneur. It sounded like that trip was self-funded. You raised the money for it yourself?
Yeah. God, yeah. I mean, locally in Hemel, I just did a car cleaning round, so a bucket and a sponge and all the rest of it, and harassing people, knocking on their doors if they looked like they had an expensive car, and then I was sticking the fivers or a tenners in a little kitty until paid for the school ski trip. And it was back in that day where there was companies like Snow Coach who were based in St Albans, and that it was actually quite affordable, from that perspective. It's as in comparison to what it might be these days. And a lot of us got away on that first trip that sort of got us the bug.
Yeah, well, I travelled out by coach quite a few times at school and at university as well. The other thing I heard from your chat with Phil is that coach broke down on that trip as well. That sounds like a classic nightmare trip to the Alps.
Yeah, it was. It was quite a cold night there. I do remember. Very back.
But you ended up in Austria. So in the UK, you got yourself like an IASI qualification. That's the dry slope qualification. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we all got put through those. The dry ski slope, the English Ski Council back in the day. That got us that sort of first foot on the ladder. And then helped. It's always the sort of the fee, isn't it? Getting up the ladder, and then you connect to the next bit and the next bit, and that was what got us to Austria, actually.
And where were you instructing in Austria?
In a little village called Seefeld, just above Innsbruck. That was great. Very small sort of ski school type of small village in a way, and gave us a load of experience, load of training, and then it kind of stepped the pathway towards Verbier, where we ended up. So Austria was great. I mean, I never forget those days. Fantastic.
How did Verbier end up next on your list? Because obviously people think of Warren Smith now, very much associated with Verbier. It's been your home for a long time. But there are a lot of ski resorts in Europe. What was it that drew you to Verbier? How did that work out?
Always been into freeride skiing, and the imagery of it, and watch those films like Blizzard of Ours, and you see sort of like John Faulkner and Mark Shapiro doing their photos back here in the day, and then a very dear friend, very local connection from Hemel Hempstead. Actually, she just passed away sadly, just over a week ago. But Joyce Read, who was always involved in the English Ski Council, ran a company called Peak Ski. She put me and Pete, who I was talking about earlier, she put us up, got us started. We went over, with practically sort of no money, and she let us stay in a chalet until we got on our feet in Verbier, showed us the ropes, and that was kind of it. We came over in '94, sort of haven't looked back. So that was how it sort of kicked off in Verbier for us.
Right, I do remember Joyce. I think I helped her with recruitment when I was at Natives as well, and she was always, one of those people, probably a really good mentor for you in the industry to start off with. I remember her being very encouraging. So that's what got you to Verbier. I started Natives, I mentioned that, in the winter of 98, 99. And I think that was quite a significant winter for you as well, because was that when you joined the Volkl team? You came onto the Volkl team?
Yeah, started to ski for Volkl. Quite a lot of things were happening then in the freeride sort of scene. The freeride skis everything was growing, and I remember you guys, Natives, being quite a big supporter of all the things that we were trying to do. Like whether it was an event or whether it was putting on or supporting something in that free ski space. We worked with you guys really closely. Actually, it helped. So that was a big year. Myself and Guido were making ski films. We started doing that again. It was very much a bit of a raw scene. It's quite new, but then me and Pat joined forces, started to do some free ski camps, things like that, and it was an evolving time.
You touched on so many things there. Lots of them I want to talk to you about. You were working as an instructor there already, were you?
Yeah, in Verbier was coaching, instructing people, and then in the spare time or whatever time you could get, trying to get off and learn, Verbier's kind of incredible off-piste or freeride terrain, and pretty much just hanging out with as many good skiers as you could do, to try and better yourself or up your game. And that was really what it was about, sort of hanging on in there and trying to learn the ropes, really.
And how did that link with Volkl come about then? Did they approach you?
Yeah, it was a friend of mine, Jamie Strachan, who many people might know from the ski industry in the UK, and a great Chamonix guy, a very dear friend. He made the connection for me, and then the thing sort of evolved with Volkl, and I'm sort of it's been a quite a long journey with those guys, and I'm still on the team, but I'm sort of pushing or evolving my role a little bit into education rather than on a free ski side of things. I'll be free skiing with a Zimmer frame probably quite soon, so I think. Time for a change.
Right. Yeah. I do. I know Jamie as well, and actually you mentioned he's a Chamonix based. I've seen him for years, but just in the other room, and in fact, even possibly behind me now. In fact, you can just see over my shoulder that one there. That's one of his designs for the ChamJam. He was very talented. Designer and graphic artist, wasn't he? And I think he did top sheets maybe for Volkl.
Right. Yeah, he made that sort of top sheet design for the free ride ski with the picture of the wizard on it. Jamie's a bit of a ledge in that space. He still does quite a lot of bits and bobs like that. But yeah, he was a big. I think when we were doing things like the Verbier ride in Verbier, they were doing ChamJam, and there was just like a really good spirit with that guy. He came over and commentated for us, helped us quite a lot actually. Like everyone did, everyone sort of mucked in back in those days.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're talking about that time there, which really was the burgeoning era for freestyle skiing in the UK. It was a very, very exciting team, and you were involved, right at the beginning then. I mean, you just mentioned Pat a couple of minutes ago, and that's Pat Sharples, who's now coach of GB Snowsports team on that free. And I've interviewed him before, and listen, I'll put a link into the show notes. But you were right at the heart of that, and I remember certainly at the London Ski Show, you were the guy who was organising all the riders for the competition they used to do. They used to have a not half pipe, a quarter pipe there, didn't they?
Yeah. London was great, actually. I mean, for what budget that the guys had to work to, which was never an easy budget. It never usually is in skiing. But, it was a great time when people were evolving it, and, Stu and Spence were doing incredible work designing those venues. And then, people came across from overseas. It kind of brought that international vibe to the London show. It was great. Obviously, me and Pat, him and another mate were messaging the other day about meeting up at NEC. So I think we've got a bit of a sort of a memory reminiscent type of gathering going on, I think, on that Saturday of the show. So that would be great. But yeah, Pat was great. We set up the British free ski camps together, actually, sort of off the back of, being together around that time that the show was going on. And it was very much, there were a few key players, like that's what I was saying about natives, why it was so fundamental back in the day, because without the kind of media strands, people wouldn't have known what we were doing or would have been able to find out. And sometimes at that stage, the mainstream ski mags, or I guess the internet wasn't what it was, they didn't quite reach our audience. Whereas I think the natives audience was really specific, and it was already involved in the scene or the rising of the free ski scene movement. And it was brilliant. We really did. I think what you guys did, I think you taught a lot of us about how to sort of reach people you wanted to reach, if you know what I mean. It was a bit of an education back in the day. And I think we all took something from that.
Yeah, well, it was brilliant being, involved in it in that era. And I think I've referred to you on different episodes of the show before how, I remember Pat brought along to an event we were doing at Birmingham. He said, I've got a couple of kids, who are training at the moment. It'd be really nice to have them along. And one of them was Katie Summerhays, who was like 10 years old or something, is now a dual Olympian. But, I wondered when, with London, for years and years at the London Ski Show, they used to have aerials, and they have people doing those very formal, aerial flips, which, while athletically entertaining, were nothing like the way it suddenly changed. And I wondered whether it was difficult to persuade them to kind of do something different and to have a course pipe and have a bunch of young kids throwing themselves around the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was something set in stone where I guess the ski show to a lot of people was the sort of Saturday reunion for ski bums or people that had done the seasons. it was the ski instructors skiing down in unison, doing their demos. And then it was definitely aerials. And that was a bit of a change or a transfer. And it took a few years to do it. But it definitely, I think there was a lot happening. And like you say, 99 was quite a pivotal year. You know, I know me and Pat had kicked off doing free ski camps. There was a lot of international riders. Salomon brought out the 1080 ski, like a big old, benchmark of what was going on in the industry. And then a friend of ours, Francine Morellian, funny enough, I was just watching it on TV the other day, like The World Is Not Enough, the James Bond movie. She did the stunt double, you know, in the skiing scene, and she was obviously a friend of ours from Verbier. There was a lot going on, and it was breaking through. And that like you say, that excitement vibe of how I think what you'd saw someone like spinning off of axis, and how it was changing things for the viewers, you know, and it didn't hit home straight away, but it did. It broke its way through, became really exciting. Candide Thovex was just breaking onto the scene as like a 16-year-old kid in '99, and you know, there was some really cool things to watch, but people were being sort of thrilled by it, and then it made its way bigger each year. It just broke through further.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember, you know, that vibe. I think maybe people now who are going to show or just, you know, following Ski Sunday or something might just take it for granted that, you know, you got these, young kids ripping it up in the snow park the whole time. But It was so new, and it was very exciting. The most exciting thing about it was, you know, I know you're saying there are international skiers there as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, so many of these kids were young British people who had come from the dry slopes that you're talking about, and they just started, you know, the indoor snow slopes had just started around that time as well. So people were coming from there. And that's what really stood out, I think. And, you know, people, holiday makers, you know, who were there, gather around the bottom of the slope, we're looking at this, and little kids, you know, we're looking at this thinking, this could be me in a few years' time. Absolutely. And actually, that's what happened.
It's exactly what happened. It's so right. And, we were lucky in the sense that there was the background, a bit like what you were saying with the aerials. Sheffield had a base of freestyle already. And then the club level, the Sharks that were there, you know, the team that Pat and Andy Bennett were involved with, and they were helping to evolve that. And you're right, like Warmwell down the south of England, big freestyle scenes, Halifax dry ski slope. So a lot of this stuff was going on in the background. And at that time, again, people were watching the review videos online, probably watching them through natives, wherever it was going to be seen. And they wanted to get involved, and they could access it in a way with much less, what's the right word to use for this? But back in the day, you'd have gone to a dry slope, there could have been a club level, may not have felt so inclusive. The freestyle scene seemed slightly more grungy, a bit more inclusive, a bit more like, I'm from a council estate, not ashamed to say it, but it felt like it didn't matter where you were from. You could walk into this scene and it almost benefited you. That, it didn't really matter where you were from. So there was none of that stuff to put you off in the first place. So there was a bigger catchment net. And like you said earlier, the timing was perfect. And the results are obviously what we've seen in X Games, and took Woodsy a few years from seeing him so many times come into Susfay on these camps and things like that, and it was just, God, what a thing to have seen that first X Games bronze. It was like, wow, things have really changed since we've been doing it.
For sure. I mean, so many of the names there, James Woods, you mentioned, Andy Bennett, who I know went on to coach with you as well. Also, Paddy Graham was very coming along to a lot of those camps, doing those competitions at that time. Yeah. He's now very involved. He's not like a competitor. He is more involved in the filming side of things, isn't he?
Yeah. Legs of Steel. I was just looking at Paddy. He's just been in Argentina doing getting some incredible snow down there. But he's a really respected athlete on the Volkl team. But he's taken it stages further with being on the Red Bull team. He's a freestyle skier, freeride skier with a really good business sense, and has done an incredible job, I think, for the Brits in like you say, it's not so much in competition, but probably getting the same mileage and inspiring just as many skiers as a competitor by actually doing it from a filming perspective. So yeah, really cool.
Yeah, and you have always been a very busy person back in that era. You were doing like so many things because like you're doing the instruction side of things. You were running the British freestyle camps, which you mentioned. You had the ride events going on, which are these free ride events. Out in Verbier and Saas-Fee, and in the UK, a whole series of different events there, which was giving a chance for these younger riders to compete. And on top of that, you were making movies as well. Like you said, Blizzard of Ours was something that inspired you. And you mentioned Guido Perini. Actually, yesterday I watched Snow Odyssey, which might have been one of the first ones. I watched Snows in the House as well. And, I remember going along to like a premiere of Snows in the House, in Leicester Square.
Yeah.
It was very, very exciting. And he said Candide Thovex. He was in one of those, wasn't he? How old was he then?
He was 16. I think that was when me and Guido went up to Narvik. And in fact, we were in Riksgränsen back in May 99. And he was just, at the time, throwing tricks that we were like, it was mind-boggling for this young kid. And he's obviously become probably the biggest name, along with Tanner Hall, probably the biggest name in freestyle skiing, free ride skiing. So yeah, it was amazing, and you're right. We sort of somehow blagged our way through, asking one other person who asked another person. It was probably a client of someone from Verbier, but we managed to get these premieres, these film premieres, and it was a bit like going to a skiing event anyway, like a freestyle free ride skiing event, And I think me and Guido, we shot that movie on one of those little DV video cameras. There was no budget, and I'll never forget. People talk about computers these days, and me and Guido spent quite a lot of weeks at my mum's house in Hemel Hempstead, right next to the dry slope. And we were editing the whole movie on a 4 gigabyte hard drive, and it was an external 4 gigabyte hard drive. And we went to the pub every time we did a slow motion effect, like to let this thing render on the computer. Went to the local pub, had a pint, came back, and it just about finished. And it was. It was mad. It was absolutely mad. You look back at it now, and it's just like, oh my god, what you're capable of now is just such a different world.
For sure. But you were there, and you were doing it and making it happen. It was interesting actually to move from Snow Odyssey to Snows in the House 3, which I finished with last time. In a space of a few years. How the production values, really improved over that period. I'm guessing you got better cameras as well. Equipment as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're getting to working thing. A lot of guys out there use Adobe Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro. That's what we got used to it. Computers got better, hard drives got bigger. Things were, being done in a nicer sense. But we're also learning by watching all the other ski movies in the scene. It was never us. We were never the best guys. There was always greater people which you could learn off of, watching their videos and like, oh my god, wow, that's the next level. So always aspiring. And then the more we did things like that, the more other people approached us, came to the London show. We got other guys on board from like Chrome Productions who helped out with the with the Snows in the House productions as well. And then I guess from the side of the filmmaking, you get to a stage, I think, where you make that sort of decision, or you get to the road where it's like, do you follow the academy side of things, or do you keep going down the filming, or is there the Verbier ride event? So tried all those. Passion was always on filming and running free ride comps, although probably got way too many grey hairs because of it at these stages. But then eventually you sort of realize that you got to pay the bills, and then that's kind of where the bread and butter of the ski coaching side of things is more of a stable. For
sure. I mean, the amount of time that must have gone into making those films would have been ridiculous, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, I think when Snow Odyssey came out, I definitely went through, because of like hard drive failure, because of getting the master tape ready, I went through like 3 days, sort of 2 nights of no sleep, just straight through. And then on the second one, which was the maddest story, but we did this, we made the film, and we were at the Prince Charles Cinema, and cinema's full of 500 people. It was a really good turnout, actually. And somebody kicked because we actually in those days had to hire a projector to play off our tape to go into this thing and to broadcast it in a different way, because we obviously couldn't shoot it onto film. And one of the guys helping us from Sweden that we'd met walked by in the cinema, this little narrow passageway at the Prince Charles projector room, and he kicked out the power cable. And one of the, we saw him going to plug the thing back in. We were like, no, don't. You had to wait like 20 minutes for this bulb to cool down. Plugged it straight back in, bulb blew. So we had to go and stand there in front of 500 people saying, really bad news, but we haven't got a projector for this. And a mate of ours, you remember Stu Morgan from Oakley, he was well connected with a private members bar called Soho House, which has obviously become a very big brand. He rang this place up, and within half an hour, we had 500 like misfits, lunatics, and all sorts of people from the ski industry pile into this private members bar on a Monday evening. And they broadcast the film along all their screens amongst 3 or 4 floors. And it was like, sometimes when you look back on it, it's how the hell did we even do that and get away with some of the things we did? But it was so loose. It was just, it was good fun. And I don't think you really, you kind of got to go through that.
Those are the learning experiences, aren't they? But possibly a reason why you kind of segued away from, all that time going into movies and the area that you're most well known for now. But talking about the amount of energy that you invest in things, we mentioned the events that you've run, the camps, the movies, but also you've published quite a few books as well, and DVDs for that matter.
Yeah.
Some of which have been. I was looking at the one Go Ski. That sold a lot of copies, isn't it?
Yeah, it did actually. A few 100,000 bowler counts. I mean, they paid us. I mean, it was for DK Books, and it was a publishing deal. I wasn't really. I wouldn't say I was very well experienced in that space, but did it because it was a great opportunity, and the book was put into quite a few different languages. I never forget. It opened a few doors, actually. In fact, leading on to things like the TV show, The Jump, that was mainly those production guys that looked at that book back in the day because it was all about publishing. But I never forget walking through St. Anton, like the high street, and seeing the German version of the book. And I'm like, my God, I wouldn't play the best ski instructor or certainly skier, in Europe. And then you're walking through St. Anton, like this Mecca town, and then there's a German version of Go Ski on the shelf in this bookshop. And I'm like, it's almost embarrassing. Like, what Austrian is going to buy a book of this British guy standing there with and there was the same it's the same in France as well. But yeah, it's interesting.
And I seem to remember you telling me at one point as well that some of your books got ripped off and were published in China, and they're like selling really well in China, but not helping you at all.
yeah, like everything does. I mean, the funny story with that, I was doing a video like typical Academy week in Verbier, and I think it was 2011, something like that, maybe. Yeah, 2011. So a guy walks up, and after doing this video analysis, I was talking to him in the room, and all I saw was this guy sort of nodding as like he hasn't got an absolute Scooby what I'm talking about here, but he's nodding and he's really polite, lovely guy. Didn't speak actually much English, but he was really into his skiing. Like anyway, so after the thing, he comes up to me with this book, like, "Oh, can you sign my copy of Go Ski?" And I looked at the book, I was like, yeah, but it's in Mandarin. I've never. We hadn't done any, I wasn't told it was in Mandarin. Anyway, I went back to DK Books or Penguin Books. I've just signed a book for a client and it's in Chinese. And like, I don't think so. It's not, we've not released it there. We've sent them proof copies. But anyway, the long story short was they'd got the book. It had been ripped off in China. And that opened the doors to go into China to start to do, the only way to make money out of it was to actually sort of show up and try and monetize what it was, and we sort of did, and it didn't. A lot of things out there as you go in there as a foreigner, it didn't actually work out in the end financially very well, but it was an interesting experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've travelled to so many places in your career. Through the filming and through that as well. But you mentioned you referred to lots of different elements there. But it is as an instructor and the Warren Smith Ski Academy that you're best known now. And, I've always been so impressed with how you market your business. I was listening to another interview, or read another interview. I think you said that you felt you've been a bit lucky that lots of journalists have featured you. But I don't think that's luck. I think you're a really good communicator, and obviously that's a tremendous skill that you need to have as an instructor. But if there is any luck in it, maybe in the kind of more recent career, that came when you kind of cross paths with Laurence Dallaglio, because you taught him how to ski, didn't you? I wondered how that came about.
Yeah, Laurence has been. I mean, a lot of you know what Verbier is like. There's a lot of people come and go through this place. Through a mutual friend of ours, who, funny enough, I met through the ChamJam guys, going back to that connection. But a guy called Rob Sawyer, who ended up running the Farinet for over a decade here in Verbier. Really good mate of Jamie Strachan's I was talking about earlier. Got involved in ChamJam. Then he came over, sponsored the Verbier ride. But off the back of that connection. Introduced us to Laurence, who used to drink in one of his bars in London. Laurence was just finishing his last year of rugby at Wasps. And I think the position Laurence was in, I think he could sort of, almost do what he wanted. He came out and skied and he learned to ski one of the seasons he was finishing off his last year. And he did really well. It was odd. We could beast him, give him all the. We're obviously quite into our biomechanics of how we teach as part of the principle of, you can do a lot of things, but you can't really cheat that element of how your body moves. And he got his teeth into end of the first season. He skied some pretty steep runs in Verbier. And then he wrote these quotes for us, sort of saying, about our coaching method. And I think a lot of people, picked up on some of the things he said. A lot of sporting people, and it was great. He's been like in a way, a bit of an ambassador for us actually, because he's flown the flag, and we've done the same back. We've tried to raise as much money as possible for his charities. Really similar actually to the snow camp charity we work with. He runs something called Rugby Works, so that's something we tried to throw back into the pot. We raised a couple 100,000 over the last few years for his thing back.
Yeah, and just maybe listener, you don't know who Laurence Dallaglio is, but he's an England rugby player who won the Rugby World Cup with England back in 2003. You mentioned he was in his last year of his career. I'm kind of guessing he might have had a contract that said he wasn't allowed to go skiing at that time.
Yeah, there's a possibility of that. I mean, I don't know the exact details of it, but he. And we got to meet the bosses of Wasps. And then I think after that ski season, went back to watch his last ever game, his testimonial game. It was fantastic. I went across with Rob, one of my academy coaches, who's a massive rugby nut, big rugby fan. And we're at Lawrence's testimonial. We're like, we shouldn't really be here. This is like full of all the rugby legends. And we're sitting right at the front. Lawrence looked after us. And we were quite gobsmacked, that seeing this guy in his environment, not in the mountains where it was like this guy that's just learned to ski. We were over in his, and like, wow, the contrast of seeing a true sportsman and what they've achieved. It was quite phenomenal actually. But yeah, we've kept in touch, and he comes out to ski with us a lot in Verbier these days. And in fact, he tries to help us where he can. And I know he was talking to Lindsay and trying to help, who does some of the PR stuff in Verbier and helping her son out with some work experience. But yeah, there's a lot of reciprocal that seems to go on in our industry, as you well know.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the charity side of things. I recall that he organised a number of charity bike rides that you went along as well, like quite epic rides, right? Yeah,
there was. I mean, there were some big rides, definitely some big rides. 2012 was started doing that, but we actually went together that summer of 2008 and did our first kind of what became the Dallaglio Cycle Slam, and we did the Pyrenees. And I know you're obviously a big cyclist, Iain, and you're big into that type of element of sport. But really, it's one of those crossover things for me in skiing. Like, I love doing the downhills on the other side of the mountain, going down fast. But but I also really love the uphill, and it crosses over, especially in ski technique terms of leg extension, flexion. I mean, you couldn't really get a better strength building, stability building setup for your skiing, and than what cycling actually is. It's an incredible sport. But yeah, done lots of that and loved every minute of it.
So you've mixed with plenty of other celebrities. Maybe he was the first. I mean, Verbier is the type of place where you always get a lot of celebrities anyway. James Blunt has been a regular. I had an interview. We did a special with Peter Hardy a while ago, and he told me all about when he did the book about James and some of his stories behind that, but also the royal family as well.
Yeah.
I remember one time at the London Ski Show hearing that, Warren's going to be showing Princess Eugenie round, were you? You're just showing around the show kind of quietly around the side.
Yeah, she was great. I mean, because obviously we've always needed as much coverage as we can get in the ski industry, because you don't just get given it, really. And I think that's what we've learned that, as you were saying. And taught Beatrice and Eugenie that season, and they she very kindly agreed to pop the head in the ski show, did a walk around, just as a bit of an ask, as a favour. And that was very kind of them.
Yeah, but I thought that, that was great because, it wasn't like, as far as I could recall, she had a special security detail with her. You literally just, showed her around the show, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess, you build up relationships with people you're taking skiing, I guess, or especially when you're going off piste into certain environments, you sort of have that trust element. So yeah, there was more like that. I think there was a guy in the background somewhere hanging out, but it was, it was good. I didn't think it was too much. I think it was at the Earls Court show, actually, maybe then.
Could have been a while ago. And you've also skied with Prince Harry, who I believe has a few freestyle skills of his own.
Yeah, God, yeah, he was pulling off backflips. I remember the security guys. We were skiing. I think we were off the Bec of Crepon Blanc, over towards that area, up from Civier, and we skied off the back of their first rock he found, pulled off a front flip, did it again, and then I think there's about 3 security guys on that one, and they were quite nervous. He was launching it, and he went for it with his skiing. That's for sure.
That is impressive. Would have been good to get that on film.
Oh, I did. There's a couple sort of deep rooted in my phone of that particular. I'll ping that across to you. Yeah, it's interesting.
Excellent. So it kind of made sense, with your, contact knowledge of, celebrities. When you mentioned The Jump earlier, when that celebrity reality ski show, The Jump, came to TV, you were brought in as a consultant. Now, I love that show. I still miss it. I was lucky enough to go out to Kutai the year Bradley Wiggins and Louis Smith and Jason Robertson were all there, and I loved it, kind of being part of it. I wondered in that time, in the different seasons, who were the best students you had? Who were the best people learning, how to ski?
That year you're talking about, actually, people like Spencer Matthews and Louis Smith, they got their head down, and these guys were, you saw it for yourself. They were actually skiing. They started off at Hemel Indoor Snow Centre, and they came along. Spencer hadn't actually skied, believe it or not. He had snowboarded a few times, and Lewis was a very low experience level, and they nailed it. They were carving, but they were properly carving like you'd expect when we take people through their instructor training. And to sort of put if anyone's out there sort of gets a rough sort of take on ski instructor levels, they were above a level 2. They were somewhere between a level 2, level 3 instructor in the space in a very short space of time. And it wasn't that they had tons and tons and tons of weeks, because our coaching time that we got with them was quite small, actually. It was a couple of hours, if that, each day, off the back of them doing lots of other sporting things. So sometimes they were quite fatigued, but those two, and also on that year was Jason Robinson, and he was the same, rocked up at Hemel, did a couple of sessions, drove the length of the country actually to come and do a couple of extra sessions at Hemel, and their skiing just went through the roof. And we've kept in touch, actually. We sort of, even when we do our ski technique lab tour in the UK, popped in and stayed with him, and that was a great year. It was a shame it was the last year, but it was a great year. But then exchange rates and all those sort of things they take their toll.
And the cost of insurance as well. I think for Channel 4, became an issue. I mean, it must be really interesting working with Olympians who are so skilled in a particular sport, and then they get this new challenge that they have to take on. They've gone through the process of learning and finessing and improving in a certain area. So they have, without having the immediate skill set, they know the processes of how to adapt new skills. Working with someone like that must be a real pleasure.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, it was like, from that example of someone who's a sponge, like literally laps up every bit of it. It's always interesting to see the difference on someone's real open-mindedness, like zero ego, or on the flip side of it, you can get someone that's got the ego, doesn't want to be told, and you obviously get, like you would do in a typical ski group, in the mountains, you might get a group of people with exactly the same attitude, but certainly people that have excelled in a sporting environment and that have that sponge mentality of taking on information. God, the results were some of the best I've ever seen in coaching career, really.
Right. And, you mentioned those who don't want to be told. Would you be able to be indiscreet enough to tell us who were the worst kind of learners or to teach?
We had some people that were probably not in the best shape to ski. I mean, I wouldn't better sort of say it was, but I think you could probably watch a rerun of the show and figure out who that might be. And then there's also, weirdly enough, there was people like Linford Christie that, back in his day was a fantastic athlete. But because perhaps of the way that he possibly trained as a consistent runner and he developed something in his hip and couldn't steer one of his legs inwardly. And we were looking at it from a biomechanical point of view, and we were trying to put it down to the idea that he possibly spent his whole career in a gait where he didn't ever want to have an inward rotation of his leg. It needed to be in this certain sort of functioning piston machine-like way. And he literally, one of his legs just could not steer inwardly. So he just didn't pick the sport up. He was blocked from learning the sport. But that was a real biomechanical issue.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because that kind of leads us on, I think, to where you are now with the Warren Smith Ski Academy. Because as the academy has evolved, I think so has your philosophy over the years, that we've known each other. And you have a huge focus now on biomechanics and the issues that kind of come about with sedentary lifestyles. I wondered if you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we set up a thing called the Ski Technique Lab about 10 years ago, and it's kind of like, we want to try the goal of it. You'll see it a lot at the NEC show you were talking about. But we want to empower people to do a lot of the changes in their skiing themselves, and that's a physiological sense. If someone spends $500 on, I don't know, best instructor in Europe, and they go along, but they've got this difference between the left and right side of the body. It kind of, whether they take the ski lesson with whoever they take in Austria, whether they don't take ski lessons and watch some cool clips online and just want to go and have a great ski, avoid injury, or if they come and book on a course with us or whatever they do, the reality of it is, if we can get to someone 3 or 4 weeks before they come out, we have a much better person to mold into a skier. And if someone comes to us, sometimes it's frustrating as a coach where you're like, it would be wrong of me to try and push this range of movement in the space of 4 or 5 days, because that's actually going to take you 3 or 4 weeks of, some stability, mobility, flexibility routines. Then we can get you there. So we've come up with this system, which is where we do 6 tests, and we basically just look at the 6 axes that you'd move to make the sport work technically correct. But the content, at the moment's free of charge. People can look at it. They can come along to shows. And we're trying to make it accessible. So we figured out a long time ago that 5% of people take ski lessons, 95% don't. And if we can reach that 95%, one is we can draw them into getting more of a good mentality for education. But the ones that don't, if we can give them something, they've got less chance of getting injured, and they'll probably have a better ski week with their mates and, have a good time on the snow in that sense.
And so you're talking there about people doing research prior to their trip or prior to, a course with you. How much difference do you think an individual skier can make to their own skiability by improving their flexibility, working on those biomechanics?
Massive. I mean, that's the only word I could say because of just tried and tested examples of this. Just absolutely massive. We've tested over 6,000 people. We know that on the ankle flex test, everyone needs to get above 10 centimeters, and most people don't. So on this lateral control, like the classic A-frame test, most people don't have these muscle groups switched on. It's where they get the classic knee injuries. And also for inward steering, if someone's on a steep face or skiing down the Joncian or Tortan with us, where you've got to get that turn, you've got to control your speed, we know that everybody has got that weaker turn direction. And we can identify that weaker turn direction. If you're on the steep face, it's where you start getting your butterflies going like, oh, God, I wish I was on my other direction to get this first turn in. Might be same for guys doing the speed test. There'll be one coloured gate that they are not comfortable with compared to the other going around, and they drop their course of line on. Depends on what level it is. We used to see it in freestyle skiing, seeing injuries that shouldn't have happened, people trying to stomp their landings, going back seat, couldn't flex into their boots. And we're actually creating relationships now with the shops and the retail team. So we're developing this season or launching the Ski Technique Lab expert program, which will be people like, take a few names out of the book, like the Colin Martins, Alex Wallace. They'll end up, taking on board this, educating people, but to have a much better conversation with let's take, for example, the Saturday lad or girl that works inside a ski retailer, doesn't have that in-depth knowledge of ski instruction, but we want to try and pass on this information or knowledge that they can then have a deeper conversation, get the people in the right ski kit, maybe even ask the guys to see a video of these people skiing, before they buy a pair of boots.
Cool. That sounds interesting. We'll find out more about that, I guess, at the show as well. I mean, the Warren Smith Ski Academy, you are the brand. As you've grown, I think you've got a team of, 15 instructors or so at the moment?
Yeah, that's it, that team of 15.
How do you delegate being you to those people?
I think the older I've got, I've just been able to do less. Just naturally pass on to the team. No, I'm really lucky, actually. We've got like a team that's built like a bit of a family. Most of the guys have come through our training programs, actually, like the Gap Year courses, which we've been doing over 20 years, and they've been really popular. And the crew are quite interested in the content. So they're all like fully qualified level 4s. They've gone through their training programs, but they've got their teeth into this element of ski biomechanics. And like I said earlier, it's like the part of skiing that you can't really fake, or you can't, if someone hasn't got the range of movement, that you can't expect them to put the ski kit on and it's going to suddenly appear. So they've enjoyed, I think, working in this space, and they've got the bit between their teeth where they're seeing results now, being able to work remotely. I mean, I'm doing a session in about half an hour with someone remotely, where they're going to be working through the ski technique lab exercises at home, 700 miles away. But we're setting up a remote coaching session where then they have got 3 weeks to go and work. They're going to meet us at NEC show, recheck their scores there, maybe even ski a little bit on the snow slope that's there, and then go to their indoor snow dome. And they're going to be buying a pair of boots, this particular person, and we're going to link them to someone in the shop, show them the footage before they go, and have a closer recommendation. So trying to take ski coaching to the next level. You look at the guys like Carve, they've done a brilliant job at crunching data, building a really cool bit of a device, and all these little elements that we're trying to do. I think we're just trying to make the product for the consumer better. Whoever the consumer might be, it might be a ski instructor doing the level 4. It could be someone who's going into their second week of skiing. But we're just trying to make that thing where it isn't just rock up, expect it to work, because usually it doesn't. People think they flex their ankles. They don't generally. They're usually backseat, and this is how the sport has always gone. So we're just trying to interrupt the norm a little bit and get there a bit earlier.
Right. Okay. That's good. You mentioned the instructor qualifications, because another, a string to your bow is that, you're offering kind of Gap Year instructor courses.
Yeah.
A few years back, I think I'm right in saying that you changed from, offering the BASI course to the IASI, which is the Irish qualification. Was that a reaction to Brexit?
We were a bit ahead of the Brexit curve. We did this back in 2013. I mean, I'm half Irish anyway. I use an Irish passport and citizenship. And again, my friend I sort of grew up with on the ski scene, Pete Gillespie, he also was fundamental in developing it. But we went to Interski, like the Congress back in Argentina. It was a really great event, 2015. But the association as an English-speaking exam and something close to home, which was done under the same, I guess in theory, the same countries. There's a lot of IASI exists at the indoor snow dome at Hemel and Chill Factory. It was just nice, and the timing felt right to look at an alternative. It didn't always have to be one system, and it did in a way feel like there wasn't anything else close to home. So it was quite a good way of looking at it. It was also financially quite a useful tool, because it was a little bit more cost effective at a time when exchange rates weren't working in our favor. So we managed to put the quality of the product out there and not charge more for it. People were doing their qualifications and the pathway was still the same. But when we went further down the line of hearing the first Brexit chat in 2016, which looked like it was going where it was going, we actually then really sort of got behind this, because it was clear and the conversations were already out there, and lo and behold, it has happened. It was more beneficial to have an EU recognised qualification than not. So the basic qualification is great, and it still works, and there's still some great elements to it. It's just that we just chose a slightly different direction, and it hasn't gone wrong, if that's the right word to use. It's like both of them work. They're all really quite cool, but we just use that, and we seem to hasn't put people off, put it that way.
Yeah, but that turned out to be an extremely prescient decision to change 3 years before Britain, decided to leave the EU. So that obviously worked well as well. Well, okay, I think we're coming to the close now. Now, if people want to find out more about the Warren Smith Ski Academy and everything that you offer, they can find you at the National Snow Show at the Birmingham NEC next month, actually October the 15th and 16th. I wondered if I could just ask you, why you're at the show, what people can get out of a visit to your stand.
Well, we're actually taking, as part of the ticket price, or however people have acquired their ticket, they're going to come to the show, and people will be getting a certificate at the end of the show with the full breakdown of their biomechanical assessment. So it's like, if you've got to turn your legs left and right to make a ski turn, if you've got to lean and make angles, if you've got to absorb and flex, we're going to be assessing every range of movement that you need to use in skiing, giving it a score, and then giving people an at-home working exercise platform. So we'll be doing a talk on the main stage. We'll be doing a thing in the skills centre, and we'll probably be doing some on-site coaching as well. So they'll have that ability to come and get the full test done at the show.
Brilliant. And, from your point of view, you mentioned, people may have looked at some of the videos before, they may have heard of the academy, but they get a chance to actually meet you and your team and find out a little bit more about it in person.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be bringing a crew of the gang from Verbier across. We're going to be over there for the whole show, and there'll be about 6 of us on site that'll be constant testing. They'll come and meet us. I think we're doing a Q&A on the skills stage, which will be quite cool. So they can chuck in any question they want about skiing. Hopefully we've got the answer. And then the stage will be doing a talk each day. And then, hearing that there's going to be some real snow inside there should be quite a fun thing as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to being at that show as well. And that's when we'll next get to meet in person, I would imagine. One further question then, for this winter, if people are interested in taking your courses, where will you be offering courses this winter? Well,
we'll kick off early season skiing in Cervinia Zermatt, and we'll be literally kicking off our winter the day after that World Cup downhill finishes. So that's our first course starting on the 6th of November, and then we work through 5 weeks in Zermatt. Obviously, I'm up on the glacier, staying in Cervinia just because it's a bit more cost effective. But we go there, we get guaranteed snow, and then we switch back to Verbier mid-December. And then we're in Verbier right the way through till April. And then we're back over to the Zermatt Glacier mid-April for a few weeks. In the middle of the season, we'll be going to Japan again. First time since all the COVID craziness. And so that's our first Japan trip for quite a few years. I think we finished there in 2020, February, just before it broke out. And this is the re-engagement of it already. So, yeah, we're very excited to get back there. That's our main program. And then we've got a few indoor Snowdome courses around October as well.
I know that you love Japan. You've been out there. I think you're taking some quite large groups out there. Maybe by the time you finish, like 70, 80 people maybe?
Yeah, 70 odd people across there. We love Japan. It's been, that was an eye-opener back in the day. Never knew powder like that existed. So, yeah, got to go back there always.
Yeah, well, I think Japan remains on my bucket list, as for a lot of people. But, maybe if you wanted to get off listener, you can join Warren out there next year. That's brilliant, Warren. Thanks for sharing your time. I know you've a meeting with Volkl lined up, and you're clearly doing some more online coaching, etc. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Wish you all the best for this winter, and I look forward to seeing you, in just over a month or whenever our paths cross next. In fact, I am coming out to Verbier this winter for my first time in several years. So it would be amazing if we could, if you have the time in your schedule, we could even get a few turns in together.
Definitely book that in. I'd love to have a ski. That would be brilliant. I'll make some time for that for sure.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that I did meet up with Warren, and if you'd like to hear how that went, you can listen to episode 172. Thank you for joining us for this special flashback episode of the Ski Podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and like to help the podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. You can follow us or subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can give us a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on Spotify. Plus, you're always very welcome to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/The Ski Podcast. It's always appreciated. Look out for our next episode arriving into your podcast feed in a week's time. Until then, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.